So much, Catherine Robertson, Nick Leggett. Appreciate your time. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Hariaki nei, accident investigators map debris at the scene of yesterday's fatal helicopter crash. Its maintenance records, parts and onboard electronic data will also be analysed for clues to the cause. The pilot and his wife are confirmed dead. The 3 children on board when the Airbus plunged to the ground remain in Wellington Hospital. The government gets a monster refund with 2 retirement villages paying back more than $20 million in wage subsidies. Retailer Noel Lemming gets a telling off for selling stuff it didn't have and misleading customers about when their goodies would arrive. And an online festive shopping frenzy puts posties into overdrive. And the orangutans delighted to be moving up in the world, literally.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The precise number of people abused in state and faith-based care will never be known. The Royal Commission of Inquiry into Historical Abuse says this is because of large gaps and deficiencies in data collected at the time. In its interim report to the government, it says the estimate that about 250,000 young people were abused may be conservative. The Public Service Minister Chris Hipkins says it's one of the most sobering reports he's ever read, and the hurt caused is inexcusable.
I certainly think that the victims have been through a horrible and horrifying set of experiences that does need to be acknowledged, and I'm sure it will be.
Chris Hipkins says he expects the Crown will make a decision on an apology once the Commission has handed over its final report. A survey of police staff has found 1 in 4 have experienced abuse, bullying behaviour and harassment. The survey information will form part of one of 2 investigations commissioned after RNZ's revelations of widespread bullying in the force. Harry Locke reports.
More than 80% of those who took part in this survey, which was commissioned by the Independent Police Conduct Authority and the police, said the force is a great place to work. But a third of respondents felt that workplace bullying or harassment is tolerated, and only a third said they bothered to report it. The police executive says the findings are a cause for concern and must be addressed. The Commissioner, Andrew Costa, says they are already working to improve the organisation's culture. Ko Harry Locke, TNA.
The cost to taxpayers of a legal dispute involving a former parliamentary staffer could go higher yet. The Speaker, Trevor Mallard, has been grilled this afternoon by a select committee on the $330,000 spent on defamation proceedings after he wrongly claimed an accused rapist was working at Parliament. The Chief of the Parliamentary Service, Rafael González Montero, told MPs a separate legal case is in train.
There is still a claim against the Parliamentary Service.
Okay. So is the committee now hearing that $333,000 is not necessarily the end of the matter in terms of the cost to the taxpayer?
Yes.
Rafael González Montero says this case has cost about $37,000 so far. A karakia has been set at the site of yesterday's fatal helicopter crash on the Kaikoura coast. Representatives of Ngai Tahu blessed the crash site in a ceremony this afternoon. Tracy Neal reports.
The 2 people killed in the crash have been named today as 60-year-old Andrew Davidson, who was piloting the helicopter, and his wife, 39-year-old Lynn Chen. 3 children were injured, 1 seriously, but the police have not yet confirmed if all those in the aircraft were members of the same family. St Andrew's College in Christchurch says 2 of the injured children are pupils there, and Medbury School says 1 of them is a pupil there. In Kekarengu, Tracy Neal.
The National Party says while there's good news in the latest economic update, the debt the government still intends to rack up is disturbing. Treasury expects the books to get back to surplus sooner than expected because of the faster and stronger economic rebound from COVID-19. Growth's expected to be stronger and unemployment will peak sooner and at a lower level than forecast in the September pre-election update. However, National's finance spokesperson Michael Woodhouse says there's no plan to pay down the huge debt.
Better than the doomsday prediction of both the budget and the pre-election update is no cause for celebration. There is still amount of spending, deficits and debt as far as the eye can see that our future generations will be saddled with.
The National MP Michael Woodhouse. Fire crews are fighting to put out a large scrub fire in a remote area southwest of Dunedin. The fire, which broke out early this afternoon in the hills between Waipori Falls and Berwick, is visible from Dunedin Airport, more than 10 kilometres away. It's just after 4 minutes past 5. The Black Caps are hopeful fast bowler Lockie Ferguson hasn't played his last match this summer. The full extent of the informed pacemaker's back injury has been revealed following his withdrawal from the upcoming T20 series against Pakistan. Coach Gary Stead says it's a good news, bad news scenario for Ferguson, who has a partial stress fracture to his lumbar spine.
What that essentially means is there is a crack there, but could be a lot worse than that. It's not a complete crack, so it is only partial, which is a good sign. It's too early to know just yet how long it will be in terms of return to play, but we are still hopeful. There is a chance for him to be playing still by the end of our season.
Stead says it's positive Ferguson doesn't need surgery, instead taking 4 to 6 weeks rest before returning to training. After Pakistan, the Black Caps finished the summer by hosting Australia and Bangladesh in white ball matches from late February to late March. Chelsea have missed a chance to go top of football's English Premier League, conceding a stoppage time goal to lose 2-1 to Wolves. They remain fifth, 3 points behind leaders Tottenham Hotspur and Liverpool, who play at Anfield tomorrow. Manchester City also slipped up, drawing 1-1 at home to second bottom place West Bromwich Albion. Reigning NBA basketball MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo has signed a 5-year contract extension with the Milwaukee Bucks. The deal is reportedly worth $320 million. That's the news.
Dodgy trucks.
Oh, it's potentially fatal, isn't it? Coming down the Brandurran Hills, I'd hate to imagine what could happen.
Dodgy houses.
This is the kitchen of Premier House. Welcome to the kitchen. A little bit of floral curtaining behind me.
And dodging politicians.
The fact that it's taken so much money to settle this is actually a testament to Trevor Mallard not apologising earlier. The actions are just deplorable.
Always on the mark. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Areas of morning and evening cloud, otherwise fine. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine apart from cloud increasing tomorrow afternoon, then evening drizzle. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, mostly cloudy tonight, becoming fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine. Low cloud about the Kaikoura coast and drizzle developing there tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, cloudy in the mornings and evenings, but fine spells in the afternoon. Canterbury, fine at first. Low cloud developing about the coast and plains overnight, with drizzle there tomorrow. A few showers for the high country tomorrow afternoon. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain or drizzle spreading north this evening, then clearing tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. A blessing has been held this afternoon at the site of yesterday's fatal helicopter crash near Kaikoura that killed a Christchurch couple and seriously injured 3 children. Andrew Davidson and his wife Lynn Chen died in the crash. Their 2 children, along with a school friend, were dragged from the wreckage, seriously injured, and are recovering in Wellington Hospital. It comes as a team of investigators spent today combing the mouth of the Kikeringu River for clues as to what might have caused the tragedy. In a moment, we'll hear from the Transport Accident Investigation Commission, but first, this from Nick Trubridge.
Police have confirmed 60-year-old Christchurch pilot Andrew Hamish Davidson, his wife 39-year-old Lynn Chen and 3 children were on board the EC-120 helicopter as it came into land at the Store Cafe and Campground at Kikeringu for lunch just before 1 p.m. yesterday. B&B owner and local resident Ian Mertens told Checkpoint he raced to the scene after seeing the helicopter spiralling out of control and plummeting to the ground at the mouth of the Kikeringu River.
Just saw a helicopter coming into land and then it got out of control, started twisting round and round and then did the dive. Bang! Helicopter on its side, people screaming. Carnage. Absolute carnage. Rotor blades and Perspex, blooming screens everywhere, belongings everywhere. It was a big grey mess on the beach.
The crash killed the couple and seriously injured 3 children who were airlifted to Wellington Hospital. This afternoon, Medbury Primary School's headmaster, Ian McPherson, confirmed the Davidson's son, Angus, a Year 7 student, was one of the children injured in the crash. In a statement, he said the Medbury community draws on strength from our Christian foundations and from the collective care and support it offers in difficult times. He said the school would reopen its doors next Monday morning for families in the community to gather to support each other. He said counselling services would also be made available. And St Andrew's College rector Christine Layton confirmed the 2 other children on board the helicopter were students. She said the school was supporting the families whom they held in their hearts and prayers at this devastating time. She added the school was grateful for the support from emergency services and those in the college community. Richard Genman was a colleague of Andrew Davidson's and has known him for 20 years. He says one of the children injured in the crash was a friend of one of the Davidson's children.
It's been a very solemn time. We've come together as a company and we've all met in a town hall meeting and discussed Andrew, and we've put in place plans for a memorial for Monday with him, and we're looking forward to really properly remembering Andrew and sharing stories and then joining together afterwards. And this is a time of year when everyone's thinking about family and spending time with family. So for a family who's not going to get to enjoy that time, it's devastating, and we feel so sad for the Davidson family and, of course, the friend of their family that was on the aircraft with them.
Sales records show Mr Davidson, who also runs a B&B with his wife from their lifestyle block in Ohoka, North Canterbury, had only purchased the helicopter in October. Whilst the bodies of the couple have been recovered from the scene, the helicopter remains on the beach, covered by a tarpaulin. A blessing organised by Ngaitahu leaders was held at the crash site this afternoon. For Checkpoint, Nick Trowbridge.
Meanwhile, the Transport Accident Investigation Commission, or TAKE, is appealing for any witnesses who may have footage of the accident to come forward. The helicopter's components will be examined along with maintenance records. Simon Pleasance from TAKE says an investigation team has spent the day gathering evidence.
Things like mapping the site, not just the fuselage, but any other wreckage that might have been jettisoned or landed nearby. And they are examining the wreckage itself. They'll be interviewing witnesses as well.
Simon, have the bodies been removed from the site?
Yes, they have. All people who were on board have been removed.
In terms of mapping the site and the debris and the wreckage, we know from speaking to people who assisted yesterday that some of that was moved and the helicopter itself was moved. How much of a complication is that?
Well, it would have been much more of a complication if it had been left where it was, which was below the waterline, and it would have been substantially damaged overnight by tidal and wave action. So it was really important to remove the wreck from where it was. And also the locals needed to shift the wreck, I understand, from the water in order to extract people from inside.
So will you be talking to those witnesses about where they found particular items then?
Yes, we will. We will talk to everyone and anyone that has seen, that either saw the accident or was involved in the rescue and recovery immediately afterwards. That would include the local people, but also the rescue services as well.
Have you managed to get access to any footage?
We have requested footage. We put out a call for anyone who might have had video of the actual accident or of the helicopter as it was flying before it arrived at the scene. It's quite common for commercial drivers to use dash cams on their vehicles, and anyone who was driving through that spot yesterday at about 12:30 in the afternoon may have captured the helicopter flying before the accident or even the accident itself that the driver might not have noticed, cameras on these vehicles are quite wide angle and may well have recorded very useful evidence for the Commission in figuring out the causes and circumstances of this particular incident.
Are you aware of any of that footage being presented yet, though?
I can't confirm yes or no whether we've already received that sort of thing. That sort of confirmation is difficult for us to do because of the need to protect evidence.
Is there any recording devices on that model of helicopter?
I don't know about that particular helicopter itself. Some pilots will install cockpit video recorders, and some companies do that as part of their own policies. In this case, I don't know about whether or not there was such a thing on this particular helicopter. What's called black boxes don't typically get carried on helicopters, and that is something which is a area of interest for the Commission in getting these things fitted in future.
It appears that this helicopter changed hands recently. Will you be talking to the previous owner, and what information will you be seeking if you are?
It is typical for the investigation of any transport accident for the investigators to do an in-depth analysis of the history and maintenance history of the aircraft or other vehicles involved, and we will certainly be doing that. So not just the maintenance history under the current ownership, but also previous owners.
And that was Simon Pleasance speaking there. It is almost 16 minutes after 5. Business deposits have boomed and borrowing has dropped, according to the latest Reserve Bank figures, strengthening calls for more wage subsidies to be repaid. Today, retirement villages Somerset and Ryman both announced they are paying back the millions they took, citing improved economic outlooks. It comes as figures released to Checkpoint show business bank deposits are up more than $17 billion on the same time last year. Critics say that's because the rich are getting richer and companies which are making bumper profits need to rethink their wage subsidy take. Nita Blake-Person reports.
Reserve Bank figures for October paint a rosy picture for businesses. Total borrowing from banks was $109 billion, $6 billion less than the same time last year. And while lending's down, deposits are well up, $104 billion compared to $87 billion in 2019. Julnot Wong is a professor of accounting at Auckland University and says there are many outfits doing very well.
So in spite of the various lockdowns we've had, the business this year has been better than business last year. And these stats on borrowings and business deposits just indicate that businesses are operating more efficiently, better management of inventories and receivables, and hence that's why the deposits have gone up.
The boom comes after more than $14 billion in COVID-19 wage subsidies were paid out this year. Inequality researcher Max Rashbrook says the figures highlight a real problem around fairness, as the pandemic's economic hit hasn't been felt evenly across the board.
I think it has been a good year to be a wealthy person. You know, we don't have detailed figures on that yet, but, you know, given that New Zealand businesses as a whole have done relatively well, you know, certainly better than expected. A lot of people's investments will have held up.
Those who can least afford it have suffered the most.
Inevitably, this year has been the worst for the people who are already struggling. You know, there's a lot of people who were already on low wages who've lost their jobs. Predominantly women have suffered through coronavirus, particularly in terms of job losses. You know, we've seen increased demand at food banks that were already pretty stretched, and, you know, the latest advice to the government in the briefings for incoming ministers on child poverty, for instance, is that the greatest impacts of the pandemic will have been on the children who are already doing it toughest.
He wants more profitable businesses to pay back what they took to try and put things right.
Those businesses received significant support from us as taxpayers. The first people in line to be paid back by the businesses that have done well should be us as taxpayers. I think to put the interest of a relatively small number of shareholders ahead of the interest of the whole country when it comes to paying back the wage subsidy is completely unacceptable.
It was a good day for the government's wage subsidy returns today. Retirement village groups Somerset and Ryman, between them announcing more than $22 million will be repaid to the kitty. Both businesses had paid a dividend to shareholders. Somerset Chair Rob Campbell says backlash against companies paying a dividend after receiving the subsidy did factor into their decision to repay it.
Yeah, obviously it factored in, but a fair bit of the discussion about this stuff has come from people whose mouths are bigger than their brains, frankly. If they really understood how public companies worked and the various stakeholder interests that have to be balanced by a board taking into account a range of factors and making a decision, they would understand it much better. And in this case, Somerset's done what I think the government would have absolutely expected us to do. In the period of greatest uncertainty, we used the subsidy for the purpose for which it was intended. As we've gradually rebuilt our business and got more confident about the business and about maintaining the interests of all of our stakeholders, we've made the decision that we would pay back the subsidy.
So far, $533 million of wage subsidies have been repaid. The Ministry for Social Development has carried out more than 10,600 audits, referring 973 cases for investigations. Yesterday, Finance Minister Grant Robertson announced the wage subsidy scheme would be available again if there was a regional or national move to alerts level 3 or 4 again. For Checkpoint, Cornita Blakeperson, Aho.
It's almost 21 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that one. Those two retirement operators returning more than $20 million. Should others do the same, given it seems many businesses are in good stead? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A group representing some survivors of abuse believes the estimated number of people abused while in care is well off the mark. An interim report from the Royal Commission into Abuse and Care has been released this afternoon. It says of the 655,000 young people in care between 1950 and 2019, nearly 40% were abused. Andrew McRae reports.
The Royal Commission says the true figure of historical abuse and care will never be known because of large gaps and deficiencies in the data collected at the time, and the 250,000 figure may be conservative. The network of survivors of abuse and faith care is putting the number close to 400,000. Spokesperson Liz Tonks believes the figure's been underestimated because many places have not been included.
Like people in day schools, people at Gloria Vale and other places like that. The argument was that the data wasn't easily available. Well, we have the data and we know that it's likely that it's 60% underestimated.
She says survivors need to see action before they truly trust the Commission.
If we look at state and faith, and we would say it's a serious omission to separate them because they were affected by the same trauma, they had many of the same lifelong impacts, and they need the same solutions.
A survivor of state care between the ages of 2 and 20, Sharon Shepherd, also believes the estimate is wrong.
I know that if you were a state ward, if you were a welfare child, if you were a foster child, you were treated very differently. Everybody in the community knew that you were different. They knew that you were unwanted, and that sort of set you apart, and you became a flashing beacon for anybody who wanted to do anything that they thought they could get away with.
The report says most of those abused came from the most disadvantaged or marginalised segments of the community, particularly from Māori whānau and Pacific families. Professor of Māori Health at the Auckland University of Technology, Denise Wilson, says the negative effects of being in care and the abuse that went with it are wide-reaching.
It is a timely reminder that we do need to take a serious stock take as a country. And make some changes going forward. I think this report, coupled with the inquiries into oranga tamariki, really highlight the need to really overhaul everything that we're doing for children and young people.
Sonia Cooper and her law firm Cooper Legal represent many abuse survivors. She found the interim report punchy and believes the Crown will be dismayed reading it.
the Crown as a whole has failed to recognise the true nature and extent of the problem with abuse in care, and that it's repeatedly taken a narrow view and failed to recognise that many claims with its agencies or before the courts are the petitions of vulnerable people with legitimate claims of injustice against the state.
She thinks survivors will feel their voices have been heard.
And that those who have advocated and continue to advocate for them have been heard as well.
Public Service Minister Chris Hipkins says the findings in the interim report are sobering and the amount of abuse identified is unacceptably high.
What's clear is that over time the Crown has spent a disproportionate amount of its energy defending unacceptable behaviour rather than taking a victim-centric approach. That's a strategy that we have already changed, and we're continuing to work on that to look at how we can have a more victim-centric approach when it comes to dealing with these types of historic issues.
Mr Hipkins expects the Crown will make a decision on an apology once the Royal Commission has handed over its final report. Survivors of abuse were hoping the Commission would recommend an independent body be established as soon as possible to deal with all abuse claims, but that hasn't happened. Survivor Keith Whiffen says all survivors believe there's a desperate need for an independent process so they don't have to deal with the abusing institution directly.
These people have shown that by themselves they can't get this right. And there needs to be an independent body put in place in conjunction with a fair compensation regime.
The chair of the Royal Commission, Coral Shaw, says a redress investigation report will be handed down next year, which will have recommendations in it. For Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Electronics and appliance retailer Noel Leeming has been given a serve for misleading shoppers over delivery times. The chain has had a formal warning from the Commerce Commission after it likely broke the Fair Trading Act by promising items bought by customers would arrive in a couple of weeks. That's despite one shipment already being overdue and without checking whether the products were actually available. Anna Rawlings from the Commerce Commission details exactly where Noel Leeming went wrong.
We've issued a warning to Noel Leeming for accepting payment for some products which it didn't have in stock to fulfil the orders that were taken. And in addition, it advertised a product with a 1 to 2 week time frame for delivery, but it already had some overdue existing orders and it hadn't taken any steps just to make sure that it could meet that delivery time frame.
So to be specific, was it the taking of the money and promising delivery within a certain time period, or was it just the delivery?
Well, the first one related to products which were ordered but weren't actually in stock, so those orders couldn't be fulfilled. And the second one related to a delivery timeframe that just wasn't realistic in the circumstances that we consider Noel Leeming hadn't adequately investigated to make sure they could meet their delivery promise.
So they were misleading customers, in essence telling them that something would arrive pretty soon when actually they had no idea when it would arrive.
That's right, or they were relying on the usual supply chain, and these issues arose as a consequence of COVID and through June and July in relation to the 1 to 2 week delivery time frame. And so supply chains had been disrupted, and the Commission considered that Noel Leeming hadn't taken adequate steps to investigate that and just to make sure that the promises about delivery timeframes could be met.
Surely they knew there were already existing problems.
Well, like many businesses, they were facing pretty unprecedented consumer demand, particularly during the lockdown period with online sales, and delivery services were really disrupted across the board. But in our view, it should have, in those circumstances, taken a more cautious approach and made sure that the representations about product availability and delivery could be fulfilled.
In reviewing this situation, though, was it simply a mistake or was it intentionally misleading customers? Because the information that you've released says they already knew that they had one shipment that was overdue. So did they intentionally mislead customers in telling them a product was going to be turning up soon, or was it a genuine mistake?
Well, what we've said is that the delay that was obviously experienced with that existing order ought to have put them on notice to really take some steps to establish that the promises being made about delivery timeframes could be met. And that was in a context where everybody was facing disrupted supply chains, and many supply chains are still disrupted. So the circumstances were unprecedented, but what the Commission is saying is that in those circumstances, and at any time, businesses need to make sure that they have a reasonable basis to think that they can deliver in the timeframe that they're promising to their customers.
What's a business's obligation when it takes your money for a particular item and then they don't have that item? It's not in stock.
Well, a number of businesses operate a shipping model, and it wasn't the case here actually, necessarily, where you order your goods, but they're in fact shipped from the supplier directly to the customer. That's a drop shipping model. And there's nothing wrong with that model, but again, businesses need to make sure that they can meet their customers' expectations about delivery. And the Consumer Guarantees Act promises consumers that even if a delivery timeframe isn't specified, they can expect delivery within a reasonable time. And if they're not getting delivery within the reasonable time or within the time they've been told, they should take that up with their retailer.
But reasonable time is a pretty stretchy bow, isn't it?
Well, it will depend on a range of circumstances, and during the lockdown period in particular, we were all facing unprecedented circumstances. But taking into account the circumstances that are prevailing and the representations that have been made to customers, it's really a question of what a customer could reasonably expect in those circumstances, and they should talk to their supplier about it if they're not getting what they expect.
How many complaints did you get about this?
Well, we had a number of complaints relating to Noel Lehman during this period, which is why we chose a selection of those to investigate and focused on these particular products.
Any other retailers that you got complaints about in relation to this issue?
One, in relation to COVID and issues arising as a consequence of COVID, we did have a number of complaints this year, and those ranged from things like delivery of products, as in this case, to things like issues arising when travel was disrupted or events couldn't take place and that kind of a thing.
And are any of those still live investigations for you?
We have been working through a large number of complaints that we've received this year arising from COVID, and some of those investigations are still ongoing. Yep.
So in respect of the Noel Lehman issue, what is the comeback for the customer then? Should they be able to get their money back?
Well, each situation may vary, and our advice to consumers is that if you've got an issue with non-delivery, the first best port of call is with the supplier to determine what has happened. But yes, the Consumer Guarantees Act does entitle consumers to some remedies if they're not receiving delivery within reasonable timeframes. And what we've said in this case with Noel Lehman and to all businesses is that representations about delivery which are not reasonable can also breach the Fair Trading Act, and that can lead to a criminal prosecution.
So it's all very well saying take it up with the person you've made the purchase from, right, the retailer, but I see that a number of people who were complaining about this simply were not getting a response.
Yes, that was an element of the complaint that we received during the period where businesses were disrupted, but we would expect that businesses have ironed out those issues now and that they ought to have feasible contact details for people to get in touch if they're experiencing troubles. And that can arise particularly at this time of the year, when we're ordering things online for Christmas as well.
So you've given them an official warning, but actually what does it mean? Does it mean anything?
Well, what a warning does is explain the Commerce Commission's opinion that the conduct at issue is likely to have breached the law. Only the courts ultimately can make findings that the law has been breached, and that happens if we bring proceedings against a company in the court. We're not doing that in this case because Noel Lehman has been very cooperative. They have changed their conduct in relation to specifying delivery timeframes, and we've also recognised that these two issues arose during a really difficult time for all businesses, including Noel Lehman Group, where we had unprecedented consumer demand for online services and delivery was significantly impacted as well.
So Anna, though, if it is simply a warning, it's not going to court, Is this a situation where, well, it's almost like two strikes? If they do it again, will you take further action?
We always do take into account previous conduct for businesses if another issue arises in the future. And importantly, in this case too, Noel Lehman Group doesn't have a strong history of issues arising through our complaints, and we considered that was appropriate here. But if issues arise in the future, we would take it into account when we decide what to do then.
And that's Anna Rawlings from the Commerce Commission. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Fiji is bracing as a Category 5 storm, the worst kind, heads directly at the islands. Auckland City Mission gears up to hand out thousands of presents and food parcels, and boaties are being asked to play nice, with fleets of spectators expected on the water tomorrow as the America's Cup Christmas Regatta sails away. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Hey, have you bought anything that hasn't turned up yet, and what were you told about delivery times? Let us know. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Here's Susanna with the headlines.
The Royal Commission into Historical Abuse says deficiencies in data collection mean the exact number of children abused in state and faith-based care will never be known. In its interim report, the Commission says an estimate of up to 250,000 victims may be conservative. Public Service Minister Chris Hipkins says the hurt caused is inexcusable. The police say the findings of a survey on the organisation's culture are worrying and must be addressed. Although 80% of respondents say the force is a great place to work, a quarter of them report having been abused, bullied or harassed. 1/3 of police staff also feel such behaviour is tolerated, with a similar proportion saying they bother to report it. The cost to taxpayers of a legal dispute involving a former parliamentary staffer could still go higher. Speaker Trevor Mallard faced questions in Select Committee this afternoon about the $330,000 cost of defamation proceedings after he wrongly claimed an accused rapist was working at Parliament. The chief of the Parliamentary Service told MPs a separate legal case is also underway which could add to the cost. A karakia has been said at the site of yesterday's fatal helicopter crash at Kekerengu on the Kaikoura coast. The 2 people killed in the crash have been named as pilot Andrew Davidson and his wife Lynn Chen, who are parents of 2 of the 3 children injured in the crash. The National Party says the government has no plan to pay down the huge debt it still intends to rack up, despite good news in the latest economic update. Treasury expects the books to return to surplus sooner than expected because of the faster economic rebound from COVID-19. Growth's expected to be stronger and unemployment will be lower and peak sooner. Fire crews are battling to put out a large scrub fire in a remote area southwest of Dunedin. The fire, which broke out early this afternoon in the hills between Waipori Falls and Berwick, is visible from Dunedin Airport more than 10 kilometres away. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time for the business news now with Nicholas Poynton. Mercury Energy, Nicholas, you say, is doubling down on its electric vehicle rental business. In what way?
Yeah, about 2 years ago, this is a renewable energy company. They launched this trial to see what sort of appetite there would be for an EV subscription business. And how it worked was that you'd pay at the lower end, about $399 per month. And on top of that, you'd pay insurance, rego, the warrant of fitness, and the maintenance to rent a Nissan Leaf from the company. And the company's obviously been buoyed by the success of the scheme, is now investing about $6 million to really scale up its offering. It plans to add about 50 cars a month to its fleet to bring its total to about 450 cars, which would actually be about 2% of all the hybrid and electric vehicles in this country.
So to be clear, Nicholas, this is not like one of those car share things. It's like a car lease arrangement. You have the car the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's not like, just call up for the weekend. It'd be month on month. No. So it'd be month on month, and you people would probably go for years, fixed terms, things like that. But they did try some things with the scheme that didn't really work out. They tried offering people sort of more premium cars, things like Teslas and Volkswagens, and what they found out is that people just weren't really willing to pay the price to rent those. They were sort of attracting try before you buy types, which aren't the most profitable types of consumers that they wanted. So they've moved away from that, really doubling down here on the Nissan Leaf. So in its entirety, the company does have a lot of faith in this operation outside of the financial commitment it's made. They believe that more and more people are responsive to this the flexibility that really comes with leasing a car, and you don't have this depreciating asset sitting in your driveway. And on top of that, more and more people are acutely aware of the environmental impact that comes from driving a car with a combustible engine. So this is a country that does want to reduce its emissions or be carbon neutral by 2050. One of the ways you need to do that is really reduce the emissions off our vehicle fleet. But what we've found is that electric cars, they do come at a premium. So maybe this is a way that we'll see more and more people changing the way they drive. But also, it's worth mentioning that hopefully this will increase the amount of cars we have in the secondary market for electric vehicles and that sort of thing.
It's really interesting because obviously the whole sustainability thing, but I'm wondering whether it can be sustainable and attractive as well, because there's a lot of chatter about the way the Leaf looks. I wonder what people think. 2101 on the text. Hey, your next story is about a fledgling freight company making it easier to connect overseas buyers to, smaller New Zealand businesses.
Yeah, look, it might be a shipping solution that doesn't really help people bringing stuff into the country, but It helps for those people who want to get things overseas. So to explain how it works, I'm sure people were familiar with the concept or the business U-Shop. So that was where, imagine I wanted to buy a nice pair of sneakers from the States. They wouldn't ship to New Zealand. What I could do through U-Shop was ship that to a US postal address. They would repackage the item and then send it over to me in New Zealand for a fee. So essentially this fledgling company called Jerkrate, they are the New Zealand equivalent of that, except in the reverse. So what they try and do is help to people overseas who want to buy premium products from New Zealand. Think things like Manuka honey products, things like baby infant formula, those sorts of things. People from overseas can essentially buy from who they want, when they want, and get that shipped to this Auckland address. It will then be repackaged and sent over to them. And Jerkrate, they've partnered with DHL, the global shipping freight company, and obviously they have planes, so they don't have to worry if people were buying these things from overseas. They don't have to worry about getting their things on boats or supply shortages with containers, those sorts of things. So it's a really exciting prospect, and the company says they've seen a real boom in customers over the past 3 months, and one of the added benefits is the business it's creating for small New Zealand businesses, many of whom wouldn't be exporting their goods on a business-to-business level. So it's a really easy way for them to connect with customers that they may have overseas.
Interesting. And what numbers do you bring today?
So the NZX is up 62 points to 12,829. And while I'm on the topic of the NZX, I should mention, on the back of that announcement from Mercury, its share price rose about 2% to $6.34. When we look at the currencies, we're at 71, or our dollar is buying 71 US cents, 93.9 Australian, and 52.7 British pence.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with the business update there. The total cost to taxpayers from Trevor Mallard's false rate claim could keep climbing, with news of further legal action still underway. The revelation came at a parliamentary select committee this afternoon, in which Mr Mallard fronted up for the first time to say sorry. Here's our deputy political editor, Craig McCulloch.
The apology was some time coming, but when it came, it was comprehensive. To the man who sued Trevor Mallard,
I made a mistake, and for that I unreservedly apologise.
To MPs.
Clearly I made an error, and I've apologised for that error.
And ultimately to taxpayers.
I made a mistake.
The case goes back to May last year, when a damning report revealed widespread bullying and sexual harassment at Parliament. But the Speaker then went further. On Morning Report, Mr Mallard said he believed an accused rapist was working on the premises. Soon after, a staffer was shown the door. The man later lodged defamation proceedings.
When did you realise you'd made a mistake?
Probably within 24 hours.
Of making the initial comments?
Yep.
So why didn't you do something after the 24 hours? Why didn't you just turn around the next day and say, I made a mistake. I'm really sorry. That is not correct. There is not a rapist in the building.
Because there was an employment process involved and I didn't want to interfere with it.
Mr Mallard revealed the man had been seeking $450,000 in damages. He ended up with a payment of $158,000. Legal costs brought the total bill to roughly $250,000. But that may not be the end of it, with this development dropped by the Chief of the Parliamentary Service, Rafael Gonzalez Montero.
There is still a claim against the Parliamentary Service.
By him? Okay. So is the committee now hearing that $333,000 is not necessarily the end of the matter in terms of the cost to the taxpayer?
Yes.
The separate employment case has already cost taxpayers another $37,500, and it could be much more. National's Chris Bishop is promising they won't drop the matter.
The Speaker has besmirched Parliament's reputation through his actions. No opposition can have confidence in a Speaker that acts like this.
National intends to declare a motion of no confidence in the new year, but as long as Trevor Mallard has Labour's backing, he's not going anywhere. Jacinda Ardern has stated she still supports the Speaker. National hopes she'll reflect over the summer break. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
A Category 5 storm, the highest level, is bearing down on the Fiji Islands. Cyclone Yasa is forecast to pass directly across the country's two main islands. It's cyclone season in the Pacific, but as Christine Ravoy reports, Yasa is not the first storm to hit Fiji this year.
Fiji is still reeling from the Category 5 Cyclone Harold in April, which killed one man, injured others, and caused millions of dollars worth of damage. Rotuma is located 646 kilometres north of the Fijian capital Suva, and the islanders woke to Yasa's strong winds this morning. Itumuta Chief Ngangach Manaf says it's going to be a tough next few days.
Everyone is preparing for tropical cyclone Yasa. We were warned 2 days ago and no one's taking this lightly. Schools cancelled and people are putting up shutters and securing their homes the best they can.
Stephen Mackey, a lead forecaster at the Fiji Meteorological Service, says Cyclone Yasa is packing winds of up to 280 kilometres an hour. He says ocean conditions are perfect for it to strengthen further and people should heed the warnings.
That should be very devastating for any infrastructure that will encounter. So that's generally one thing that we are trying to tell the members of the public, because we already know that these infrastructures that are existing in some of our villages could easily be wiped out by a storm of this magnitude.
Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama is urging people to hunker down. In a video address, Mr. Bainimarama called on the public to prepare for heavy rain, damaging winds, coastal inundation and flooding.
I urge communities to use this time to trim tree branches, clean drains, board up homes, prepare emergency kits and take other steps to keep your homes and communities safe. Let's remember Cyclone Harold. At the last minute, it ramped up in strength and ended up being worse than predicted. Do not be caught off guard.
The National Disaster and Management Office says Fijians who cannot locate their nearest evacuation centre should tropical cyclone Yasa make landfall can text EC to the number 132877. NDMO Director Vasiti Sokol said members of the public could use Viber, Facebook Messenger or send a SMS to the given number to get the location of their nearest evacuation centre.
To ask the people to remain calm. As you remain calm, you also be wary of the fact that this is now being categorized to Category 5. So we are asking the general public to please stock up dry food, stock up water, ensure that your home is safe, put up hurricane shutters.
Meanwhile, all domestic flights scheduled this week have been cancelled. Fiji Airways says these include services from Nadi and Nosori airports to Lambasa, Rotuma and Suva. Mariners have also been urged to secure their vessels. For Checkpoint, Atuasali Christine Ravoy.
With 9 days until Christmas, yes, just 9, Auckland City Mission is once again gearing up to hand out tens of thousands of presents and food parcels to whānau in need. But this year things are a bit different. There will be no queues outside the mission's central city headquarters. Instead, boxes of Christmas goodies are being handed out from distribution centres across the city. Our social issues reporter Sarah Robson headed to Papakura this morning to find out how it works.
Well, kia ora, welcome to our marae. This is just another day here at the marae. So today we are part of the Auckland City Mission partnership, so 8 days of Christmas. So we're one of the many distribution sites.
That's Tony Kake, the Chief Executive of Papakura Marae. The wharekai is a hive of activity. People in hivers' vests unpacking boxes, making up food parcels and bagging up vegetables.
Sorry, we got carrot salad in the mix. Oh, finally.
Christmas is always a busy time for the Auckland City Mission, but this year, as City Missioner Chris Farrelly explains, things are a bit different.
Think back 5 years ago. Queues, Hobson Street, where we provided the same kind of service every year, but people would come out at midnight or more, wait in the glare of the public gaze with children and old people to get a present and run. Yes, we gave something, but it was at great expense, the expense of dignity.
Instead of lining up outside for a food parcel, people in need are being asked to call an 0800 number. Tony Kake says their needs will be assessed and the team at the distribution centres, like the one at Papakura Marae, will kick into gear.
And we've got a family of six children, mum, dad, 6 children. So that'll be communicated from the call centre to this central post there. That'll then come to our food distribution area. They'll make up that pack for 6 kids and, parents and so on. They'll make enough kai for that. Then the message will then be passed on to the toys area, and the toy area will make up, the 6 presents for the kids.
People are given a time to come and pick up their parcels of food and presents. It's a slick operation. Cars are lined up on the road outside the marae. They're met by someone who puts a number on their windscreen, which matches the number on their specially prepared parcels.
Yo, was that 159 though?
They drive into the car park, where volunteers wheel the parcels out in supermarket trolleys and pop them in their back seat or car boot. Edge, her son and 3 nieces are waiting patiently in the car to pick up some Christmas goodies.
We don't have to worry about getting more food, over the Christmas, and that they will be fed because they all come over a lot, and I like to feed all the kids that come over home. That's what all menus will be all happy and full, guys? Yeah.
In previous years, she lined up outside the City Mission.
There'll be like a group of us, 3 of us or 4 of us will go out, sacrifice one night to sleep out there, just to stand in the line and to get what we're doing. Getting the presents, the food in.
Edge much prefers this new system.
We have to come at a certain time and it's just around the corner. We don't have to go all the way out to Auckland, stay there for the night, and then once we get the stuff, walk all the way to where we park.
The Auckland City Mission expects to hand out about 40,000 presents and 10,000 family food parcels in the lead up to Christmas. Chris Farrelly says it comes at the end of a busy year because of COVID-19, but they won't be able to help everyone.
We've got the same kind of need. Frankly, we are not able to meet the demand. The demand is greater than our capacity and capability.
They're working with other organisations to make sure whānau in need don't go hungry over the Christmas period. But those receiving boxes of Christmas cheer say it means a lot. What's going in the boot, guys?
Hey. Go.
Present.
Mo te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson. Aho.
It's 8 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. New Zealand post workers are in the thick of a record-breaking Christmas amid a nationwide online shopping frenzy. Its couriers are delivering 2 million parcels a week and asking the public to send presents as early as possible to avoid disappointment. Katie Todd and video journalist Dan Cook took a look at the place Auckland parcels begin their journeys.
At New Zealand Post's Auckland Operations Centre, parcels whip along conveyor belts, flash under red barcode scanners, and automatically spin off into chutes destined for different regions. This is where every courier post parcel gets sorted and dispatched into the streets and suburbs of the largest city. And today, it's in overdrive, as is every operations centre around the country.
These are record levels right now, and we expect the 2 million parcels that we received last week, we expect that sort of volume to continue leading up to Christmas.
That's Chris Wong, New Zealand Post's General Manager of Business Marketing, who says Christmas parcels normally prompt a 2 or 3 week spike in activity. This year's been different. The company's busy season began with a bang in early November, when New Zealanders swarmed online shopping sales. He says staff were handling 27% more orders than last year, including 300 parcels a minute after Cyber Monday.
Despite everything that's happening around the world today, and the fact there's a looming recession, we've seen absolute record levels of online shopping occur in November. So Kiwi spent about $585 million in November, which is about 27% up on the same time last year.
It's certainly not the first online shopping frenzy New Zealand Post has dealt with this year. The service was overrun during the nationwide lockdown in March and April, creating backlogs of tens of thousands of parcels and weeks of delays for some customers. On the streets of Botany, people out Christmas shopping aren't particularly confident about the reliability of sending parcels.
We've sent a post over to China, where my dad is currently, but I'm not sure if we'll get there in time for Christmas.
I had a letter posted to me from Ormiston to Howick, and it took 8 days. Yeah, I know. That's not good enough, is it? It's really quite poor.
Practically, it's not working out because everything's taking a little bit longer to get everywhere.
But Chris Wong says the company's paying close attention to possible spikes in activity, including those due to supply chain issues from COVID-19 disruption. New Zealand Post has also expanded its fleet of delivery vans and hired hundreds more staff. Each morning, courier driver Dennis Ozdemir stacks his van with parcels and heads out to the streets of Mount Wellington, where he says staying focused and always thinking 2 streets ahead is key to a successful day. Despite the added pressure at this time of year, he finds it's full of rewarding moments.
And satisfying as well when you see the smile on the customer's face and the children that come out to greet you and sometimes give you a hug because you're their pretty much Santa, around this time of year.
Right now, New Zealand Post expects letters and parcels posted before Monday to arrive in time for Christmas, along with courier parcels sent before next Wednesday. But it suggests people keep an eye on the cut-off dates on its website and send parcels as early as possible to guarantee they get under the tree in time. For Checkpoint, ko Katie Todd, TNA.
Auckland Zoo's orangutans have a new playground that allows them to move around at great heights. The high canopy habitat was officially opened today as part of the zoo's ongoing Southeast Asia Jungle Track development. Our reporter Louise Tanuth and cameraman Simon Rogers went to check it out.
Charlie, Milor and Juanita have a new stomping ground, 25 metres high. Milor was first to climb up, followed by her lover Charlie. But Juanita, who's a little older, was still snoozing in bed. Aerial pathways now allow them to move around as they would in the wild, swinging, climbing and shuffling along. The design mimics a rainforest where many orangutans usually call home, and it's a project the zoo's dubbed its most ambitious in its 97-year history. COVID-19 put the brakes on the building progress, so Zoo Director Kevin Bewley is relieved their efforts have paid off.
It's just been a culmination of so much hard work, so much mahi here to get this across the line today, and it's just incredible to see them out and about. And at the risk of anthropomorphising, you can see how much fun they're having on the line. So they're out, they're seeing stuff across the zoo and across Auckland in a way that they've never done before.
Fellow primates, the Siamangs, are calling out for their turn, but Kevin says they have to wait.
They will have access in the new year, So this has been a stage-by-stage process, get the animals used to it, get them comfortable moving around. And so the Siamang will be the next step, so integration with the orangutans, so they have the opportunity to live together, live separately, choose their own space. And at some point early next year, they will have access to this network as well.
The pathways were created using over 2 kilometres of rope, which links up to 9 support structures 25 metres high. Ropes and ladders allow the orangutans and Siamangs to climb to the top of the platform, which extends right across the zoo's lake. Annual Zoo Pass members got to have the first look. Everyone loved seeing the primates with more freedom.
Blew my mind, particularly when we went through the cafe, and suddenly they were right there. It almost felt as if you could reach out and touch them. It was brilliant.
Oh, it was amazing. It was so cool to see them have the choice to come out and experience their habitat in a different way, and they just looked so great up there in the sky, didn't they? Yeah.
So much more natural, and I think it compares to some of the other zoos that we have overseas where they have that more natural environment and they kind of wander around you, and so you feel more at one with them.
Amy Robbins, who's the primates team leader at Auckland Zoo, says the project's been spoken of since she started 20 years ago.
Previously, our orangutan habitat was built in the 90s, and yes, there were places to get off the ground, but there were also a lot of places that they chose to sit on the ground, perhaps because those platforms or those areas to sit weren't designed with orangutan physiology in mind.
But the new environment will finally cater to the animals, who are designed to live above ground.
It just went to show when we put them up for the first time, and the fact that they went straight up and didn't hesitate, it just shows you how important it is. If we can provide a really positive environment that's catered to a species' particular physiological and psychological needs, then we know that they're living really happy, meaningful lives.
The aerial pathways are part of the zoo's $60 million Southeast Asia Jungle Track development, which is part of the Future Zoo Renewals program funded through the Council's long-term plan. The next habitats in line are lowlands for the tigers and otters and an Indonesian swamp forest for crocodiles and fish, which will be open by next summer. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Louise Tenuth aho.
And if you need a dose of cuteness, we're going to put Simon and Louise's piece on our Facebook page so that you can check out the wonderful pictures there. They look like little mini Chewbacca's making their way along a tightrope. Do check it out. RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. One of the children injured in yesterday's fatal helicopter crash was a family friend along for a ride. Husband and wife Andrew Davidson and Lynn Chen died in the crash north of Kaikoura, and 2 of their children were injured. All 3 children are now in Wellington Hospital, one of them in a serious condition. Richard Jenman, who's the managing director of the electronics company Mr Davidson worked for, Inatal, says the news of the crash was a huge shock.
It's the suddenness of it. Someone who's just in the past days departed for their Christmas holidays, and then only to find that they're not coming back, and this news turns up in the media, and it's shocking for everyone. So it's just the suddenness of it. It's really difficult.
Richard Jenman says Andrew Davidson had a long interest in aviation. A group representing some survivors of abuse in care believes the estimated number of victims is well off the mark. In an interim report released today, the Royal Commission into Abuse in Care says that of the 655,000 young people in care between 1950 and 2019, about 250,000 were abused. The network of survivors of abuse and faith-based care puts the number closer to 400,000. Liz Tonks says many places were not covered in the Commission's estimate.
Like people in day schools, people at Gloriavale and other places like that, the argument was that the data wasn't easily available. Well, we have the data, and we know that it's likely that this is 60% underestimated.
Liz Tonks, the Commission says the precise number will never be known. Taxpayers could still be on the hook for Trevor Mallard's false accusation of rape against a parliamentary staffer. The Speaker appeared before a select committee this afternoon to answer questions about the case. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Mr Mallard repeatedly apologised at the hearing to the man who sued him, to MPs and to all New Zealanders. He said he'd made a bad mistake, one that has so far cost about $250,000. It also emerged at the meeting that the man who'd launched legal action against Mr Mallard is still locked in employment proceedings with the Parliamentary Service. The National Party says that means the bill to taxpayers could yet climb as high as $1 million. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
The Police Commissioner says he's surprised how many police staff have experienced bullying, abuse or harassment in the force. A survey commissioned by the Independent Police Conduct Authority and the police themselves has found 1 in 4 have experienced bullying in some form. Andrew Costa says that number is higher than he thought it would be.
I expected there to be, a number there, but that number is much higher than anyone would be comfortable with. We need to shift that. It's not good enough, and there's a lot of work underway to make sure we keep strengthening our culture.
Andrew Costa. A third of staff who experienced bullying say they did not even report it. Many say they did not believe their complaint would be positively resolved. A Whakatane councillor says Matata residents have no other option than to move out of their homes. The District Council has been buying residents' properties after deciding the area is too risky to live in, following major flooding in 2005. Some residents had been strongly against moving out, but all, bar one, are now finalising purchase offers. Councillor Gavin Dennis says an attempt to mitigate the risk of landslides didn't work.
And so the council, and to a smaller part the regional council, have been forced into this position where, for the risk of life from the council's point of view, is too great, and that the people needed to move out.
Gavin Dennis says the Whakaari eruption has highlighted the council's responsibility to keep people safe. It's 4 minutes past 6. The America's Cup World Series regatta in Auckland will showcase a new class of boat that sailors and designers are still fine-tuning. The technologically advanced hydrofoiling monohulls of Team New Zealand, Luna Rossa, American Magic and Team UK that will compete in the World Series regatta starting tomorrow are still a work of progress. Luna Rossa skipper and team director Max Serena says the AC-75s that will be in action this week are not the final product.
The development process will keep going until the end of the Cup. So I think what we see today could change tomorrow, but let's see.
The New Zealand pace bowler Kyle Jamieson has been named in the World Test 11 of the Year, chosen by the leading cricket publication Wisden. Black Cap skipper Kane Williamson and teammate Tim Southey are also in the team. With COVID-19 wiping out much of the international calendar, the pool was limited for Wisden, so no room for the world's top 2 ranked batsmen, Steve Smith and Virat Kohli, or the leading Test bowler, Australia's Pat Cummins. Meanwhile, the Black Caps are hopeful fast bowler Lockie Ferguson hasn't played his last match this summer. Ferguson has a partial stress fracture to his lumbar spine and needs 4 to 6 weeks rest. But coach Gary Stead says they're optimistic he'll return before the end of the season. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Carl Maughan's beautiful book of gardenscapes is this week's Hump Prize. There's a silver lining in the COVID cloud that kept New Zealand from hosting the World Coral Symposium this year. We have a window on the world of sourdough. Nick Tipping celebrating Dave Brubeck's 100th birthday, and we are doing our bit to keep Kiwis stuck overseas in touch with home in the run-up to this Christmas. All on Nights of me, Brian Crubb, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Areas of morning and evening cloud, otherwise fine. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa fine, apart from cloud increasing tomorrow afternoon, then evening drizzle. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast and Wellington, mostly cloudy tonight, becoming fine tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, mainly fine, low cloud about the Kaikoura coast and drizzle developing there tomorrow. Bulla and Westland, cloudy in the mornings and evenings, fine spells in the afternoons. Canterbury, fine at first, low cloud developing about the coast and plains overnight with drizzle there tomorrow. A few showers for the high country tomorrow afternoon. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain or drizzle spreading north this evening, then clearing tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The major gaps in data on abuse among children in state and faith-based institutions has a chilling impact for some. An interim report by the Royal Commission estimated up to 250,000 young people have been abused in care. But a data specialist says the state's failure to record data properly, including the ethnicity of those in its care, means it's almost impossible to know the scale and impact of the harm. Tianiwa Hurihanganui reports.
The Royal Commission's report is startling. It estimates that of the 655,000 young people in care between 1950 and 2019, nearly 40% were abused. But just as startling is what the report may have missed.
The state didn't even care enough to keep proper records about who they were uplifting, what their circumstances were, what their ethnicity was. It makes it actually impossible to do two things. One of it is to estimate the scale of this problem, and we know it was big. But secondly, it makes it impossible to know the impact of the problem on our people.
Data specialist from Auckland University, Andrew Spall, says if one of his third-year students had submitted the report as an assignment, he would have failed them. He says the publication's release was irresponsible and he's concerned no in-depth analysis will be undertaken by the Royal Commission.
What they should have turned around and said, actually, the data's crap, and that's being brutally honest. So what is convenient isn't necessarily right. And in this instance, we know it's not right. They know it's not right, but they've still decided to publish it. And in doing that, it takes the pressure off for doing more, right? And to actually do the really in-depth stuff. Because they've actually said, oh, we've got a publication on there.
The Commission itself admits there are crucial holes in the data, including that little is known about the ethnicity of those abused in care. The report referred to a recent report by Orangutan, which found 81% of children abused in care are Māori. It also said Māori had been overrepresented in the care system since at least the 1960s, and in June this year still made up 68% of children and young people in care and protection custody. Abuse survivor Paula Crawford-Moyle says in the state care facilities she grew up in, almost every child she knew was being abused.
You know, when I was a kid in state care, it became the norm when children, and I saw lots come and go, and when you talk to one another, you share stories about what's happened to you and what brings you into the custody of the state. And it was more the norm that children were harmed in some way than not. It was weird when they weren't.
She says it's likely the number of children abused in care could be much worse than estimated.
I'm thinking it's more. And how did they come up with these figures? And I'm wondering who's doing the report writing, who's doing the investigating, what are they basing their figures on?
Minister of State Services Chris Hipkins admits accessing data has been a huge challenge for the Royal Commission.
I think one of the things we've got to acknowledge is that the data here is not great, that often record keeping has not been good, that trying to quantify exactly the extent of the issue has been a real challenge for the Royal Commission.
But he says there's no doubt abuse among Māori children was prevalent.
We do need to acknowledge that Māori have been disproportionately affected, and we do need to make sure that we are looking to the future, and that will include looking at our current systems to make sure that we're not creating the environment where that abuse is perpetuated in the future.
The Royal Commission acknowledges there is also very limited historical data available on the number and proportion of disabled people in care. The report also focused primarily on international studies, which tended to record instances of physical and sexual abuse rather than emotional and psychological abuse and neglect. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko te aniwa, hurihanganui aho.
The runaway housing market is expected to bolt ahead by another 30% over the next 5 years, while wage growth will be less than half that. The government books show the economy's bouncing back stronger and faster than expected. But the broader picture for 2021 is still looking grim, just less grim than predictions even a few months ago. And COVID still remains a major risk. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
After what the Prime Minister described as an horrendous year, 2020 ends with some better news, as delivered by Finance Minister Grant Robertson.
Today, I'm pleased to be able to report to you that our response to the economic effects of COVID-19 is working, and indeed better than expected, even just in the last couple of months since Freeview. We have been able to soften the initial blow of the economic slowdown, and GDP is now forecast to bounce back much better than previously expected.
The half-year economic update shows lower budget deficits over the next 5 years. Growth is expected to be stronger and unemployment will peak sooner and at a lower level than forecast in the September pre-election update. Net debt's also expected to peak sooner than expected, and the borrowing program has been reduced by more than $25 billion over the next 3 years. But Mr Robertson says next year will still be tough.
And the impacts of COVID-19 will continue to be seen throughout the economy. Many New Zealanders have experienced tough times this year, and there will be more to come. It is important to acknowledge those people today alongside the positive news that we have in the update.
Treasury Secretary Carolee McLeish says there are specific groups who will be hit the hardest.
Particularly for youth, women, Māori and Pacific people, Aucklanders, they've all been hit disproportionately by the downturn.
And for Metrics senior economist Brad Olsen says there are many New Zealanders still facing a difficult period ahead.
What we are seeing is a much more upbeat and much faster return to normal on these Treasury expectations. Still a world of pain, still a lot of people in a tough place, but certainly better than we might have feared a few months back.
Nationals finance spokesperson Michael Woodhouse says the update shows there's no plan to pay down the huge levels of debt being racked up by the government.
Better than the doomsday prediction of both the budget and the pre-election update is no cause for celebration. There is still amount of spending, deficits and debt as far as the eye can see that our future generations will be saddled with.
Treasury's also forecast a 30% increase to house prices over the next 5 years, compared with only 13% wage growth. Grant Robertson says the government will continue to look at both supply and demand side measures.
Minister Woods has also been seeking advice not only from the Treasury but also from their own Ministry of Housing and Urban Development around further supply side measures as well. When we come to the first part of next year, I hope that we'll be making announcements about both parts of the equation.
Brad Olsen says it's hard to know where prices go once the borders are reopened, given the heat in the market already, with very few people being allowed in.
At the moment we have net migration, which is going to be at very low to possibly even negative levels depending on where things fall out. So the challenge for the government is going to be that those house prices are continuing to rise even with net migration remaining lower, up 32% over the next 5 years to simply incredible levels. And I think what that highlights is that housing remains a perennial issue here in New Zealand. In fact, probably the greatest issue we're facing outside of the short-term hit of COVID.
GDP figures, the measure of economic growth, are out tomorrow, and all bets are on a rebound of up to 13 or 14% for the third quarter. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
It's 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. One of the last families standing in a Bay of Plenty settlement at risk from an extreme weather event has reluctantly agreed to leave as part of a managed retreat, but it will be a longer goodbye. Most Awatarariki residents have already negotiated the sale of their properties to the Whakatane District Council and will leave by March next year. Now, 2 generations of the Wally family, arguably the staunchest critics of the council's retreat process, have finally sealed a deal, giving them an extra year before they have to abandon their much-loved coastal home. This all started in 2005 after a torrential downpour washed masses of debris down the flooded Awatarariki stream, destroying dozens of homes. Residents were initially allowed back with plans for risk mitigation, but 6 years later, the Whakatane District Council changed its mind, declaring a managed retreat the only viable option, leading to a long and bitter battle. I asked Rachel Wally why she's decided to finally give up the fight.
We were seeking a sunset clause to enable Mum to stay in her family home. What we got was another year extension to our stay here. And that was our bottom line for seeking settlement, and that was what we agreed to do.
So that extra year allows you what, Rachel?
Well, it allows us time to spend with Mum. It allows us time to be able to plan our move forward, to take all the special memories that she has here and, get another family home together somewhere else. We were asking for in perpetuity. It's a huge wrench to move from our home. It's a huge wrench for Mum. So we were asking for in perpetuity. We didn't get it. So, this is the next best thing, really.
How old is she now?
I'm 78.
So is the settlement that you got fair?
Is it fair? The prices we have for our homes, the settlement, the whole process, I think, it's a bigger process. The whole process, I believe, has been unfair, and that's why we were fighting it. And this settlement is just one part of a very long process. And the way that it was set up was never going to be winnable, I think, for the community here. I think that the council should have worked with the people here instead of against the people here. And setting aside all of that, it's not about the RMA, it's not about the natural hazards, it's about how councils work with their communities. And that whole process has been really unfair for the community here.
So ultimately the price you are being paid for the house, is it market value?
It's the market value according to their valuers from 2019. We were strongly advised early in the year to take up these offers while they were still there. It's always been voluntary to take these offers. Because COVID would change everything. Well, now we found it has changed everything, but actually prices have gone through the roof. So last year's market value is nowhere near this year's market value for properties here.
The other argument, though, Rachel, is that a house that you can't live in, land that you can't occupy, is not worth anything. So How do you reconcile those two positions?
Well, it is about our family home, and it was about the ability to stay here. And we do know that, if things had been differently, if you had put things on the limb, if you had worked through different opportunities, if people are prepared to take the risks of an area they know they're living in, then that's up to those people. For our family, and it's multi-generational, from Rick's great-grandmother also lived here, is that we were prepared to stay here in perpetuity as well.
Is the risk up to the people occupying the house, though? Because the thing is, there's implications. If there were to be debris that came down and if someone did lose their life and the council has done nothing to move people on or mitigate that or retreat, call it what you will, they would be facing potentially liabilities. So the council doesn't have a choice, does it, but to deal with this?
Yeah, there are ways of dealing with it, and they haven't been contested. So, we are staying on with conditions of an early warning system and evacuation plan. That's a part of the conditions of staying on. But the whole scenario around this really hasn't been tested. We've been the guinea pigs in this situation. The government funded the retreat as an example to inform the community resilience work stream. But, we can't contest it unless we're fully supported to. So it's not a two-way thing. So the council and the experts can say this, but it hasn't been truly tested. So that's going to be for the next community in this situation to deal with.
You have suggested the idea of an inquiry.
Well, I think, everything that's come out of this has got future implications for people who are in similar situations that we have found ourselves in. And I would hate for anybody to go through what we have been through for the last 3 years, really fully hands-on, for the last 15 years since the event. It needs to be opened up for critical inquiry about what really needs to happen in these situations. And don't just throw us under the bus as an example, because we're not going to inform it unless it's fully played out. And it hasn't been. We've withdrawn. So it won't be played out unless somebody else picks it up.
Some people watching will go, oh, it's just a house. Move out. What would you say?
Well, And obviously, it's not just a house, it's a family home. It's where we spend our time with our family, where memories are built. It's just a beautiful place in Matata, and anybody who lives here will tell you that. Where we live has cultural significance to iwi here, and I know that not everybody wants us to be down here, but I mean, we've lived here for 30 years. You know, it's our home. It's where we've had many happy times here. So it's not just a house.
The clock is against you, though, isn't it, Rachel? It's ticking down. So in the end, you will be going. Where are you going to go? Do you know?
Locally. Oh, not in Matata, probably. Mum wants to be around places she knows, people she knows. Will be moving somewhere locally. And we've got 2 more good summers ahead of us, and we'll make the most of them.
Rachel Wally speaking there. A man has avoided jail after admitting to dumping a body in wasteland in the central North Island. Jiang Yu Jian pleaded guilty to helping hide the body of Wang Bao Chang, whose family thought he was overseas until he was found by police in a shallow grave earlier this year. Jordan Bond was in the High Court at Auckland.
2017, Jiang Yuzhen and 3 others took a long overnight trip from Auckland to the Central Plateau, stopping in the middle of nowhere in the dark on the Rangipo Intake Road. The reason why wasn't clear to others for nearly 3 years. A tip-off to police in March this year led to the discovery of Wang Baochang's body, covered in concrete in a shallow grave. Justice Fata outlined what happened that night.
Mr. Wang's body was transported to the burial site inside a freezer in the back of the van driven by one of your associates. A shallow grave was dug in wasteland directly beside Rangipo Intake Road, 450 metres from Desert Road. The body was placed in the grave and concrete was poured over the body.
2 people are awaiting trial, charged with murdering the father of 2. Zhang, a qualified civil engineer born in China, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact to murder, helping to hide his body. Justice Fata said from the evidence he had, this was out of character for Zhang, described as a hard-working family man, but also naive in getting involved to help a friend.
Secondly, there is a cultural dimension to your offending. Born in China under the one-child policy, close friendships have assumed great importance to you. This is important because it was your misguided feelings of familial-like obligation to your closest friend in New Zealand that led to your offending.
He said Zhang wasn't motivated by ill will or personal gain and has learnt a harsh lesson not to always trust or help his friends.
It is not a justification for what you have done. Deterrence of offending of the present kind remains a major consideration.
The mother of Wang Baochang's children was in court today. His father in China had a heart attack on hearing of his son's death.
He also explains that he has not told his wife about their son's death because of her health is very poor. Mr. Jimin further explains how in Chinese culture, parents raise their children so that their children can look after their parents in old age, but that the death of their only son means this will not happen, nor will their son be able to raise his own children.
The maximum sentence for accessory after the fact to murder is 7 years. However, Justice Fata found Zhang's previous good character, guilty plea, assistance to police and comparatively small role in the events should be taken into account. He was sentenced to 6 months home detention. He's the second person to plead to helping. Piao Yanlong was sentenced earlier this year to 14 months in prison for his role. The 2 men charged with murder are due to stand trial in July. Atuiti ko te matua I Tamaki Makaurau, ko Jordan Bond. Aho.
Fleets of spectator boats are expected on the water to watch the America's Cup races from tomorrow, and boaties are being asked to obey the rules. The Prada America's Cup World Series is the first race in the lead-up to next year's Cup final. The racing will continue into the weekend, and businesses along the Viaduct Harbour are expecting and hoping for crowds. America's Cup reporter Amy Williams filed this report.
It's been a long, hard year for many hospitality businesses in Auckland, and those along the waterfront are pinning their hopes on a busy summer. Rushworth Cafe is among the bars and restaurants on the main promenade at the Viaduct. Operations manager Salama Lowe says they've been preparing for the start of the America's Cup racing.
We are expecting a busy weekend, and I think Also, we've been very lucky with the weather as well, which always helps. And we have, staffed up. In the last few weeks, we've recruited a whole bunch of new people.
The cafe is a favourite spot for the sailing teams to grab their morning coffee.
There's lots of mixing and mingling, and it's, all friendly, isn't it, when it's off the water? It's nice. It's great to have all the teams come in for a coffee and sort of become a little local hub for them, which is great.
Right, guys, set up.
Further along the waterfront strip, business at North Park restaurant has jumped tenfold in recent weeks. Executive chef Scott Greer says the place is humming with locals and visitors here for the cup.
Business has picked up. It's obviously there's a lot more people around. All the syndicates, we're dealing with their families and stuff like that, feeding them, and there's a lot more people. Plus the weather's helping.
He says they're expecting summer months to be busy as the racing unfolds.
Straight across is the English team and American Magic. So it's great. They come in and out all day, so you can sit, have a beer, have a feed, and just watch it. It's great.
America's Cup events chair Tina Simmons says boaties are encouraged to come out on the water to watch, and their safety is paramount.
Anyone can take their boats. I think it's probably not a good idea to take very, very small craft, kayaks and so on. But anybody's welcome. This is the philosophy of America's Cup event and Team New Zealand is to be incredibly welcoming and open to everybody.
Ms Simmons says spectator boats in Auckland will need to keep within the boundaries, and those at the helm are asked to check the official Cup website daily for speed restrictions and course boundaries. She says about 17 course marshals will be out directing spectator boats, and police boats will also be out on the water.
First of all, there's some very simple rules that we're asking spectator boats to follow, and the first one of that is to go onto americascup.com. Each day have a look at what the race course is going to be, when Ian's announced what that is, what the weather conditions are, what variation to the speeds are, but predominantly it's 5 knots.
As for the first race tomorrow, all eyes will be on the weather, and so far the forecast is promising. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
Some feedback before we head off on Noel Lemming and ordering things that don't turn up on time. This person says, still waiting for my weight set that I ordered from Torpedo 7 on March 23rd. They've been good about communication. Might get it by Christmas, they say. Bob's been in touch. Bought an LG fridge from Noel Lemming. Said it would be a 10-day delivery. Time promised. Took 4.5 weeks. Have it now, so okay. Just, says Bob. Thanks for getting in touch, Bob. Don't forget you can check out our stories online, especially our video stories. And if you're going to click into one, make it the one about the orangutans at Auckland Zoo. You can watch them walking the high wire. It is absolutely gorgeous. Shot by Simon Rogers. Worth checking out. Don't forget, First Up will be back at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning, and we'll see you in the evening.
Z News headlines at 6:30. The Network of Survivors of Abuse in Faith-Based Care believes the number of victims to be close to 400,000, well above the estimate of 250,000. The 3 children injured in yesterday's fatal helicopter crash north of Kaikoura are being treated in Wellington Hospital. A select committee meeting over the cost of Speaker Trevor Mallard's defamation case has heard the defamed man is still locked in employment proceedings with the Parliamentary Service. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight.